Okay.
I'm gonna be quiet.
So 4.4, we're gonna start solving, equations that have leading coefficients that are not 1. So we're gonna factor and then solve. Also on your quiz yesterday, some of you missed some points because if it has an equal sign, that's when I give x equals blah, blah, blah. If it doesn't have an equal sign, I leave it in the factored form. Gotta know the difference. So, we are going to factor when our a is not 1, okay? 5x squared minus 17x plus 6. How do I factor that? 5x squared minus 17x plus 6. Let's look at that one. So I need something that multiplies to give me 6, adds to give me negative 17 with a leading coefficient of 5. 5 should be easy because the multiples of 5 are what? 5 and 1. So one parenthesis has to say 5x and one has to say x. There's no other way to do that. So now I have multiples of 6. What are my multiples of 6? 2 and 3 and 1 and 6. So can I multiply any of these things with that 5 to give me negative 17 but a positive 6? Well, yes it does.
It adds to this.
If I do 6 times 5, what do you get? 30, and then you have a 1. Is there any way to get to 17 that way? No. What if I reversed it? What's 5 times 1? And then 6. Is there any way to get to 17 with 5 and 6? No. So 2 and 3. What's 2 times 5? Is there any way to get to 17 with 10 and 3? What's 3 times 2? And then you have, or I'm sorry, what's 3 times 5? 15, and then you have a 2. Yeah. So I need to have a 3 here, and I need to have a 2 here. And what do the signs need to be? What? Both are negative. And listen, I want you to do this because some of you would have benefited on your quiz. Check it by factoring it back out. Okay? So if I factor this back out, I get 5x squared, yes? Then I get negative 15x. Then I get negative 2x. And then I get positive 6. Look, 5x squared minus 17x plus 6. Boom. That is the factored version right there. That's what you're working on today. When it's not a leading coefficient of 1. Technically, you should never get these problems wrong because you should always be able to check it. Some of you had plenty of time to check it on your quiz yesterday, did not, and got them wrong. Check it if you have time. Okay? There's no reason we should miss those. Woo.
You job.
Thanks, Katie. What would I do without you? Okay, next one. We're gonna factor 3x squared plus 20x minus 7. This is why we're gonna spend several days on this, because we gotta get our factoring good. You could go, Jen, it's fine. Just leave it there. Okay, that's fine. Put it up here. Thank you. And I wrote Mr. Pearson, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I love Mr. Pearson.
3x squared plus 20x minus 7. I need something that multiplies to give me negative 7, adds to give me 20, and there's a leading coefficient of 3. I can tell you right now by looking at it what it is.
I can't.
Because I need to focus on this number and this number, yes? What are the factors of 7?
1 and 7?
What's the factors of 3?
1 and 3.
Now we just gotta put those in the right order. Because those are the only factors we have. So I'm gonna have a 3x, right? And I'm gonna have an x. What multiplies to give me, I need to use 7 and 1, so I need to get to 20 somehow with 7 and 1. And that
it's a negative 7 and a positive 1. Wait, no, it's a negative 1 and a, wait, no, they're both negative.
No.
I
That's a
quit.
negative,
Never mind.
that's a positive, so only one's a negative, okay?
It's
It's
a
what?
positive 7, positive 7.
Okay, and where does positive 7 go? Does it go with the 3x or with the x?
X.
Okay, it goes with the x. And the reason we know that is this, look. 3x times x gives me 3x squared. This gives me 21x. This gives me negative x. And this gives me negative 7. When I combined all of that, do I get the same thing as up top? Yes, so this is my factored version. This is why we're gonna spend a couple days on this. Today, tomorrow, maybe Monday. If you cannot factor, you are going to struggle through this year and especially after this year. You need to be able to factor, okay? If you have to make factor charts like I did here, and just plug them in and figure it out, okay? You have to factor. Now we have 3. Oh, okay. Look at this first one. I will give you a hint on this first one. The first one is a special type of factorization where you should be able to look at it and tell me. What's that leading coefficient? 16 x squared. The 16 and x squared both have perfect squares. What is it? And what's in between that? A -1. Is 1 got a perfect square? Yes, it's 1. And there's a minus sign, so that would be a difference of squares. A difference of squares. So how does the difference of squares factor out?
4x plus 1.
4x plus 1,
4x.
4x minus 1. This you just have to recognize. That is a difference of squares. Okay, so the difference of square rule that we learned can apply when anything is happening that's perfect squares, and there's nothing in between them. There's a perfect square at the beginning, there's a minus sign, there's a perfect square at the end, there's nothing in between. Okay, you gotta start training your brain to recognize that, and you gotta train your brain that 1 is a perfect square, because that's the one people mess up the most. We always forget that you can do, the square root of 1 is plus or minus 1. I guarantee you that's what people miss the most, okay? Now, look at the next one.
3y plus.
Oh no, let's see, 9y squared plus 12y plus 4. Caden says, is it 3y plus 2 what, Caden? Squared. Caden's right. What is this, Caden? Why did you know that was that?
Because 9 is a perfect square, y squared has a perfect square, and 4 has a perfect square.
And so what was that called that we learned? It's a special one.
Something trinomial.
Yeah, perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. And watch, what's 3 times 2? 6. And remember, we multiplied by 2 again, and that should give me the middle number. That's how I know it's a perfect square trinomial. So 3 times 2 is 6, times 2 is 12. That's a perfect square, that's a perfect square trinomial. You have to start recognizing these, which means you have to do your homework. You will not recognize them if you do not do your homework. I could have solved that also. Yesterday I was kind to you because you should have noticed on the quiz that it was a perfect square trinomial on some of them. And you should have had the squared there. You shouldn't have had 2 sets of parentheses. I still gave it to you if you had 2 sets of parentheses, but technically I want you to recognize it's a perfect square trinomial. Now look at this next one. 4r squared minus 28r plus 49. Okay, always ask yourself, is the beginning a perfect square? What is it? 2r. Is the end a perfect square? What is it?
7.
What's 2 times 7? And times 2 again is 28. So what is that? A perfect square trinomial with a minus sign. So it's going to be minus instead of plus inside. So it should say 2r minus 7 squared. Always start with the front and end and see if they're perfect squares first. Because if they aren't, I save myself a headache of doing work. Okay, and you multiply the perfect squares, multiply the square roots together and multiply them by 2 to get the middle. If that checks out, you don't have work to do. Okay? Because when you do 2 times -7, you get -14. And then -14 times 2 is -28. That's how you check. Okay? Here's a bunch more. I threw a lot in here. If you notice, there's 8 slides. I figured we'll just practice. Okay, now look, 3s squared minus 24. I have a beginning, I have an end. Is this a perfect square? No. Can I factor anything out of that equation? What? 3. So in this case, when I'm factoring this expression, I simply factor by factoring out of 3. And then you get s squared minus what? What's 24 divided by 3? Can that go any further? No, so that's my solution. So sometimes I'm just factoring something out. Sometimes I'm factoring out and then I continue. Okay? So that one, there was nothing else to do, I just have to factor out. That's all I can do. Okay? Look at this next one. 8t squared plus 38t minus 10. Okay, first thing first. Can I factor something out of all of that? What? A 2. I can factor a 2 out. If I factor a 2 out, then I get 4t squared. What's 38 divided by 2? 19. And then this would be 5, right? Okay. Now I need to factor this. So my leading coefficient has 2 options, correct? A 4 is 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. 5 is just 5 and 1, right? So I'm going to put a 5 here, I'm going to put 1 here. We'll decide on the signs in a minute, okay? If I do 2's, okay, what's 2 times 1? And 2 times 5 is 10. Does that get me anywhere close to 19? No. If I do 4 and 1, okay, if I do 4 times 5, I get, and if I do 1 times 1, I get 1. Can 20 and 1 get me to 19? Yes, it can. So the 4 has to go where the 5 is not, and then the next. Now, which one's positive and which one's negative?
The second is negative.
The second should be negative, this one should be positive. And that is fully factored. Okay, now let's do the next one. Like I said, we're just gonna do lots of factoring today. 6x squared, okay, plus 24x plus 15. Can I factor anything out of all of those? What? A 3. That gives me 2x squared here. What's 24 divided by 3? 8x, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. Oh, I already know what numbers we're going to break down the next one to. Anybody know what numbers we're breaking the next one down to?
1 and 5 and 2.
1 and 5 and 2 and 1, yes. So 2x, x. Am I going to multiply 5 by 2 or 1 by 2? Can I do it? If I multiply 5 by 2, I get 10, right? And then I get 1. If I multiply
2 and 1.
2 and 1, you get 2, and then you have 5, which is 7, right? So is this factorable further?
No.
No. This is your solution. Your expression factored. You can't factor any further. Okay? Gonna probably swing back over here. We'll erase some stuff in a second. Now, here's some more. This time, this has an equal sign, which means what?
This is solve for
You have to solve for x, okay? When it says factor, you're leaving it in this form. Once again, there are no equal signs on any of these here. Those two have equal signs, which means my final solution should say, in this case on A, x equals blah, 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 blah. And on B, it should say P equals dot and dot, okay? So, and we're not making you check for solutions currently or anything like that. I just want to know what the two options are. So let's start with A. 3x squared plus 10x minus 8 equals 0. The first thing we ask ourselves is, can I factor anything out of all of that? No. So that means I just got to straight up factor. I need something that multiplies to give me negative 8, adds to give me 10 in the middle. My leading coefficient is 3. So that means that my factorization has to break down into what? 1 and 3, there's no other option, so 3x and x. And now, what are factors of 8? 1 and 8, 2 and 4, okay. I need to get 10, positive 10 in the middle and negative 8. If I use 1 and 8, can that get me to 10? No. If I use 4 and 2, can that get me to 10?
Yes.
What do you have to do, Kaden?
4 goes on the right side and 2 on
3 times 2 plus 1.
Okay, let's try it that way and see what happens.
the
You said 2 here and 4 here? And you said 3 plus 2 and minus 4? If I do that, I get,
No, because that's negative.
No, 3 times 2, or you multiply 3 times 2 gives you 6, and then you add the 4. So 1 times
She
4.
wants to do on the other side.
you wanna turn it the other way.
It doesn't work like
Yeah, oh, yeah,
You wanna do it like this.
yeah.
That wouldn't work, because that would give you negative 6 and positive 4x.
that. Told you.
But listen, your way doesn't work either, Caitlin, with the signs.
No, it's a positive 4 and negative 2.
You want it to be 4 here,
No, 4 on the other side.
4 here,
Yeah.
so that it's positive 12,
Mhm.
and then you want this to be negative.
Yeah.
Good, so if I factor this, I get 3x squared, I get positive 12x, I get negative 2x. Positive 12x and negative 2x gives me 10x. And then I get negative 2 times 4, which is negative 8. Now, I'm not done, I have to take both of these and set them equal to 0 and solve for x. Okay, subtract 4, x equals negative 4. Add 2, 3x equals 2. Divide by 3, x equals 2/3. So x equals 2/3 or x equals negative 4. Right now, they are not making you plug them back in and check for which one actually works, or if both work. Right now, they just want that, okay? Later on, you're going to have to plug them in and tell me if both work, if one works, or if both works. Both work, I can't speak. Okay, now, let's try the next one. You have 5p squared, yes? And somebody besides Kaden and Elle are gonna do this one. Minus 16p plus 15 equals 4p minus 5. What do you think I need to start with here first?
Everything on the same side.
Everything on the same side, good. So I'm gonna take these two things and move them that way, because it's just easier, okay? So I'm gonna subtract 4p, and I'm going to add 5 to both sides, right? Add 5 here, subtract 4p here, and I get 5p squared minus 20p plus 20 equals 0. Beautiful. Now, my leading coefficient, do you see this 5p squared, 20p, 20? What do you notice about all three of those numbers? 5 goes into them, so why don't we just factor that bad boy out to make it easier, okay? So if I factor a 5 out, I then get p squared minus 4p plus 4, yes? Is that correct? P squared minus 4p plus 4. Okay. Now, what do I need to do? Will something multiply to give me positive 4 and add to give me negative 4? Will something multiply to give me positive 4 and add to give me negative 4? When all you have is 2 and 2, 4 and 1? Can it work? You say yes?
Is there a 2?
You say yes. I say. What'd you say?
Is there a 2? Okay, find negative 4.
Okay, let's talk about this. This has a perfect square, yes? What is it? P. What's a perfect square of 4?
2,
What's 2 times 1?
2,
And then times 2 again is?
4.
So that is a perfect square trinomial.
Inside it.
So you're gonna say 5p minus 4 squared equals 0. Okay, now, with that, okay, I am going to take, or not p minus 4, I'm silly, it's p minus 2. Gotta take the square root of that thing. P minus 2 squared, okay? With that, I am going to take this thing and set it equal to 0. P minus 2 squared set equal to 0. How do you get rid of a square? How do you get rid of a square?
Is root.
Yep, take the square root. If I take the square root of 0, what do you get? 0. So I get p minus 2 equals 0. I add 2 to both sides, and p equals 2.
See,
So I only have one solution on that one.
did you just divide the 5 when you said that zero?
Did I just what?
Like, when you get rid of the 5, is it just because you divided by 5?
Yeah, basically I'm dividing every number by 5. Okay. The only time I have to set what's equal to 0 out here is if it's an x. Because if you factored out an x, then it would have x equals 0 as a solution also. Does that make sense? Or a p or whatever it was. Okay, let's try this. It says you have made a rectangular quilt that is 5 feet by 4 feet, okay? You want to use the remaining 10 square feet of fabric to add a decorative border of uniform width to the quilt. What should the width of the quilt's border be? Look at the diagram they gave you. How can I figure this out? What can I do? Okay, what can I do? Set up an equation. Okay, how's that equation going to look? How can I set up that equation? What'd they give you? They gave you stuff to work with.
It's like that one we did before, right?
Yeah.
So it's 4 plus 2x times 5 plus 2x.
Good. 4 plus 2x times 5 plus 2x. What is it set equal to?
4 times 5 times 2.
4 times 5 times 2. Nope. What, Katie?
10.
10. Why 10?
This is one, it says 10 rings.
Because that's what's left. Okay, so 10. So now from here to solve, I have to FOIL and then refactor, correct? Okay, so let's FOIL this sucker. If I do 4 times 5, I get 20. 4 times 2 is 8x. 2x and 5x is 10x. And 2x is 4x squared, right? Equals 10. Put this in order. 4x squared plus 18x plus 20 equals 10. Subtract 10, right? And now I have 4x squared plus 18x plus 10 equals 0. Great. Is there something I can factor out of all those to make my life easier? 2. I can divide all this by 2, right? So then you get 2x squared plus 9x plus 5 equals 0, right? Something is wrong here. Oh, I know what's wrong. This should say, that doesn't make sense. Give me a second. Let me think this through. I need to have this be negative. Let me tell you why. This should be negative, this should be negative, this should be opposite, so that I'm adding it to both sides. Because you have 10 square feet of fabric left, but it needs to be negative so that it works out, because it's technically included in there right now. So I have to take it away. Does that make sense? Okay. So when I do that, I'm gonna get this. Now, can I factor what multiplies to give me -5, adds to give me 9 with a leading coefficient of 2? Of course, one of them has to be 2. And 5 is just 5 and 1, right? So we have to figure that out. Can I multiply, yeah, this is easy. What's 5 times 2?
What's in the
10. So 5 is here, 1 is here. Which one's negative, which one's positive? 1 is negative, this is positive. Okay, meaning x plus 5 equals 0, x equals -5, right? And 2x minus 1 equals 0, so 2x equals 1, meaning x equals 1/2. Which one logically works for this problem? Yeah, because we're dealing with material. Can I have negative material? No, so this is the answer for this one. You would have 1/2, the border should be a 1/2 foot or 6 inches on both sides. Okay? That's where we're gonna stop. I'm not gonna make us do the next, two. Oh, actually, we do need to talk about this. Okay. Finding maximum and minimum value of a quadratic function. What form is this in right here? Intercept form. If you have something in intercept form and you want to find the maximum or minimum of quadratic function, what is the maximum or minimum of a quadratic function? It's the vertex, right? Okay, so you use the equation x equals p plus q over 2, right? Okay, the maximum or minimum occurs at the average of the zeros p and q. So you should be able to know that already. They're just tying it together for you, okay? So then they give a problem where they're gonna ask about that basically. Monthly Teen Magazine has 28,000 subscribers when it charges $10 per annual subscription. For each dollar increase in price, the magazine loses about 2,000 subscribers. How much should the magazine charge to maximize the annual revenue? What is the maximum annual revenue? So what would I have to do there? What would you have to do? How many subscribers does it have right now? 28,000. And how many do they lose? When they up it by $1, right? So they lose 2,000 every time they up it. Okay. Now, the other part was, subscribers are charged how much currently? 10. So, and we're upping it by X amount, right? So how can I figure out what is going on here? Let me help you out a little bit. Can I factor something out of here? What? How about if we factor out negative 2,000? So that the x isn't negative. So if I factor out negative 2,000, then you're left with x plus, what's 28,000 divided by 2,000? What?
14,000.
14,000?
But wouldn't it be negative?
Yeah, it would be negative 14,000. Okay, and this is x plus 10, right? Okay, to help our system out a little bit, why don't we just change this number to 14 for now? Like this now is in what form right here? What form is that in now? Intercept form. So to find my vertex, which is my maximum or my minimum, right? I'm gonna take P and Q. So if I change this to just 14 for now, to work with P and Q, make it easier numbers to work with, you get what I'm saying? I can change it back into thousands at the end.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm gonna say, it's P plus Q over 2, right? But it's opposite of P and Q. So 14 minus 10 over 2, correct? Okay, 14 plus negative 10 is 4. So 4 over 2 is 2, okay? To maximize revenue, the subscription should cost $10 plus $2, which would give me, so if they charge $12 for subscriptions, they get the most people to buy their magazines. Okay, that's why I said let's change it to those numbers to make it a little bit easier to work with. Okay, which means the maximum revenue would be what? If it's $12, I could plug it back in, I'd plug the 2 in and solve for the whole equation. And you would get around $288,000. Okay. So that's what we're looking for. These are the things you're doing today, leading coefficients that are not 1. We will do it tomorrow as well.